So now we move to a presentation. What do you know? This is a topic is going to be a keynote presentation about building bridges, public-private partnerships for an equitable AI future. And I'm delighted to introduce your speaker for this presentation, Carlo Tortora Brayda, co-founder and task force member, NAIC, ISAO, and founder and executive chairman, Tortora Brayda Institute. So, Carlo, come on down. It's time for Carlo. Well, okay, Carlo's getting ready. So I guess it's time to entertain, right? You know. No, that's not my role to entertain. However, let me ask you a question. When you think about this broad topic, this topic of AI economy, employment and equity, what goes through your mind? Do you see opportunity? Do you see challenge?
It's so weird when you.
I said this in the last panel I was on.
Because no one thinks that
We have to embrace the challenge.
Yeah.
All right?
It's weird.
We should not let people just state that, oh, it's impossible.
Yeah.
It can't be
can
done.
hear him
It's just,
well.
as the dystopians like to say, it's the end of everything. I like to say, look, when we put our brains together and we put our thoughts together, we can solve problems. It's been proven over history, hasn't it? So this is just another one of those challenges. So let us all go together and work together to find solutions to the challenges, embrace the challenges, and find opportunities. So now, with that, let's turn it over to the man, Carlo Tortora Brayda.
Thank you, Kevin. All right, let's see if this works. Yeah. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, at the back? Yeah, no problem. All right, let's see if this works. Can I have the technical team provide the PowerPoint for me? You want me there? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So I've got my PowerPoint loaded up, and the previous panel was looking for a bona fide person from a lesser developed country, and here I am. Unfortunately, I didn't quite make it to the previous panel, but I can fill in, I think, a little bit of what the distinguished panelists were looking for. In terms of my background, I'm half Italian and half Ethiopian, and then I've lived in America for a very long time. My family is Californian, and I'd like to talk to you about the last 15, 20 years of my life in about 15 to 20 minutes. So I've worked throughout my life in the business of building private-public partnerships. And in the course of the session today, I will talk to you about a private-public partnership that I formed in the past and some of the trial and tribulations behind that one. And some of the positive outcomes, of course. I will talk to you about my current private-public partnership, which is fundamentally what I work on with the United Nations on AI for Good. And then I'll briefly talk to you about the future public-private partnership, which is something that my think tank and the US National AI and Cybersecurity ISAO is launching in the form of Cyber Eagle project, which is a very significant new effort. What I'd like to say here is, in terms of kicking it off, really is that partnership is inbuilt in humanity. It's what's enabled us as a species to succeed, to separate ourselves from other animals back in time. And we're navigating always on this fine threshold between individualism and collaboration, right? We want to, Dawkins wrote this phenomenal book, The Selfish Gene. Very strong book with, very convincing arguments about, why being an individual and driving for your own, gene pool to carry on is so incredibly important. But on the other hand, as a society, we've really succeeded by partnering, and I'd like to, start off with that. And since we're talking about cavemen and Neanderthals, it's the right time to talk about me. So here's my background. Like I mentioned, I'm Italian-American, Ethiopian. I spent about 10 years of my life in Ethiopia for several reasons that I won't bore you with. But that gave me something quite unique, which is the grassroots experience. What is it like to implement new technology in a country like Ethiopia, which I think is very typical of a lesser developed economy. It's a country that is advancing rapidly, but it's got its own deep and complex problems. And that's like probably half of the world. And when we look at building bridges and AI equity right across, that is something that we really want to bear in mind. Currently, like I said, I'm the executive chairman of a US global think tank. I was an AI engineer in the early 90s. And here goes the presentation. So really, we're talking about equity, which is in the title. Equity is about making accommodations for people so that everybody has a fair and equal chance at development, right? That's really difficult to accomplish when there are issues like the digital divide, when half the world is not so well connected, when not everybody speaks English or one of the main languages in the world. How do you go about providing equity in that case? On top of that, the educational aspect is really, really important. For us, AI has become a daily routine. We live with it, we're excited by it, our productivity is developing so fast because of it. But for half the people of the world, it is such a faraway concept, and I'll point some of that out on some of my slides right now. There are barriers, significant barriers to connectivity. There are economic barriers, and there are also political barriers. Sometimes, not all governments in the world have the finesse of wanting to provide freedom of speech to their people. And that has real repercussions. There are economic barriers. It's expensive to create data centers. It's expensive to roll out infrastructure. When you look at a country like Ethiopia, it's so largely dominated by Chinese investments in road building, in telecommunications, everything. All the equipment is ZTE, There's some issues there. It's very much, it's a partnership that excludes one part of the world and creates also a threat for one part of the world. And we need to bear all these things in mind as we try to strive to create public-private partnerships that really work for the people of the country. Because ultimately, creating a world that is equitable, creating a world where everybody has a fair chance at developing their country through AI is I would say it's a national security prerogative and primary mandate, because otherwise we create conflict down the line. In 20, 30, 40 years' time, if the other half of the world is disenfranchised, does not have the tools to develop wealth, to develop communication on a global basis, they will become isolated and they can be radicalized in their own way. So down the line, there are real issues with not creating an equitable AI world right now. Infrastructure limitations. Some countries are very difficult It's very difficult to roll out infrastructure in a country like Ethiopia, for example. I'm going to use that as an example since it's a place where I lived a very long time. Mountainous country, high altitude environments, very, very difficult also geographical barriers to the rollout. And then digital literacy is very, very poor, right? And so therefore, there's some real issues that come with that. You can give somebody a device, but if they don't know how to use the tool, it's kind of pointless, right? Today, as it stands, 33% of the world remains unconnected. And that's a lot of people. That's almost 3 billion people. That's not insignificant. Of those that have internet, 55% don't have good enough internet. So what's the point, right? We've all suffered having bad internet, right? Those of you who remember the early days when we had dial-up modems, remember how much we suffered, right? When we had that 28.8 beep, 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 and then we had to wait forever, right? Well, that's still kind of the reality. I'm not saying everybody uses dial-up modems. What I'm saying is that in the rest of the world, in countries that are in development, even though the country might have a 5G policy, on the ground, it doesn't work. So people, they use smartphones, but they use smartphones for communication, for telephone calls. They don't access the internet with it. The majority, many people don't know really what's behind the scenes, what it can do for people. So the digital literacy is very much for me a big sort of crying battle horse that I really want to sort of stand behind. Now, we look at LLMs. Again, we're all so excited. I'm so excited about ChatGPT, Gemini, Llama, all these wonderful things. I'm using them all, Claude. I love them. And we assume that the rest of the world can go along with that and improve their medical capabilities. But the languages aren't there. The languages aren't there. LLMs exist in Italian, French, English, German, Russian, Chinese, Spanish. But a lot of these local languages, it doesn't exist in. And so therefore, how do you go about deploying AI equity when the LLMs don't provide for those languages? The reason why they don't provide for those languages are data scarcity. So take, for example, the Ethiopian national language, which is called Amharic. It's a language that is spoken by probably 80 million people in a country of about 150 million people. It's a significant population, right? But there's just not enough data in that language. There's a complex grammar, a complex script made up of 255 letters. Good luck with going to implement an LLM for these languages. So how can we talk about AI equity when we don't have these basic tools in place? And then, of course, resource limitations. The esteemed gentleman that was here before talked about how incredibly expensive it is to build AI models, hundreds of millions of dollars. Ethiopia's national budget is currently about $15 billion, and it's like doubled. It's almost miraculous. Half of that is foreign aid, right? And so there just isn't the money to do as much as needs to be done. And here, unfortunately, it is also it's a different kind of race. It's like a space race between the superpowers of the world to conquer Africa and to conquer other developing nations, right? The Chinese are investing a lot, and Americans invested a lot at different points in time, and it's like a sparring ground. But in the meantime, the people in these countries, in many of these lesser developed economies, are not benefiting from AI. So here's an example of a real PPP that I created some time ago between the federal government of Ethiopia, the state governments, the local NGO that I used to run at the time, Microsoft, and the national school system, the K-12 school system. Also, we had some partnerships with the 22 University of Ethiopia and a number of universities in London. The idea was to create and drive entrepreneurship. It was to drive digital literacy. It was to drive utilization of digital innovation in the school system. And it worked. It worked, but it was hard. And I'll give you an idea of how hard it was in a minute. I've got a slide for that. But it was rewarding. So what I'd like to say is that you have to put sweat, blood, and tears in getting a relationship like this to work. I'll explain why, but then the results can be really uplifting. Through this program here, we actually basically took about 10,000 people out of abject poverty and a further 20 million children that benefited from digitalized education. This is an example of what it actually means, what digital innovation and actually means on the ground. There's a juxtaposition there. You're talking about a country where still today 60% of people rely on wood to cook, and 47% rely on communal water supplies to get their water. So if you got clay pots to get your water from the river or from the lake, if 3/4 of the people are unemployed, if you need, wood to eat, talking about AI it's like a far stretch. It's almost like talking about time travel. So I'm not proposing that we don't do AI. I propose that we do, and that we put all of our effort conjointly. The whole world needs to really focus. This is the time to do it. But a lot of the basics need to be put in place. And the basics are education and so on and so forth, and I'll run through that. These are the prerequisites for PPP success. The governments, first of all, they need to commit to democracy, equity, and transparency, regardless of ethnicity or religion. That's not something that happens often. Look at Myanmar. Look at Ethiopia. There's conflict based on different ethnic groups. It's been going on for the last 4 or 5 years, and that's absolutely awful. So there are issues, and government clampdowns. They block out the data centers. They block out the internet cafes. People don't have access, right? So very important prerequisite. Government has to commit to democracy. And between the saying that they commit and the actual output of that of the genuinity, if you like, is sometimes there's a massive chasm. Then the corporations that participate in the private-public partnership, they need to look at this with a long-term view. It can take 10 years. We partnered with Microsoft. It was about digitalizing secondary education. Yeah, but before they can actually drive a profit from that, it can take 10 years or more. So corporations must go into this with the full knowledge that it's a very long-term strategic investment. And local NGOs need money. So I've lived that on my own skin. It's almost impossible. It's so hard to raise money as a local NGO. International organizations is different. United Nations get the money. The big guys, the Red Cross. But they're not everywhere, you see. When I mounted my NGO in Ethiopia, we were the only ones working in these far remote rural territories, which is how I got to talk to the Somali pirate. So these are the challenges that we have. The challenges are that as the PPP is always pulled aside because there's so many different interests. There's a corporate profit motive. There is a ton of red tape you got to battle through. The NGO, the local NGO that wants to push their own cause, and usually it's a very noble cause. They're the purest of the lot, frankly. The lack of budget, the government's interest, which is really tied to getting as many votes as possible, and there's no longevity beyond that. And corruption. Corruption is rife. So what do? This is something you got to think about. It's a reality of a PPP. We all say, corruption, terrible, stay out of it. Don't bribe anybody, because you can't. It's unethical. But what do you do sometimes when your project is blocked and there's some guy that says, yeah, but there's some issues with the compliance there, but I can get you somebody that can fix it, and it will cost you $100,000 or $50,000. Then what do? You escalate that to the boss, and the boss will say, oh yeah, he's right. In fact, actually, you probably need $100,000, 50 for him and 50 for me, otherwise it's not going to happen. You get containers blocked at customs, containers with devices, custom duty paid, import duty paid, but they're not compliant for some mysterious reason, and you can't get the equipment. They can stay there for years. Your project is going up in smoke. All the money and all of the investment goes up in smoke because that container is stuck at customs and it's not going to be liberated. So what do? Do you give in to bribery or not? You can't. But otherwise, the whole thing goes up in smoke. So these are the real problems that PPPs face. So, to bring it all together, the success formula really is what you need to do, and this is a secret of all partnerships, you need to make sure that everybody's personal motive is aligned to the overall motive. So governments, their motive is to secure their control on the elections and control the country. The corporations, they need to fulfill their ESG and CSR mandates, but they also need to create new revenue streams. The local NGOs, they need just money to keep the lights on, frankly, and do the good work that they want to do. And then ultimately, the people are the most important stakeholders, and they need to be educated. So the second sort of large PPP I'd like to mention is one that I'm very much involved in, is the United Nations AI for Good program. This is something that I was involved in from the very early stages in 2020, building that out together with the UN. I've had a 30-year relationship with the United Nations. And the creator of AI for Good is a German gentleman called Reinhard Scholl. He's just retired now. A visionary guy, very humble, beautiful, really beautiful person. And he thought, look, AI has to align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Right? We need to promote that. We need to cultivate that kind of movement. And now it's become a global phenomenon. The AI for Good get-togethers are huge. And I personally manage the Innovation Factory in climate change and also for North America. The climate change one, right after this session, I'll be doing a judging session for AI for Good climate change. That's, again, it's a PPP. There's a partnership there between the host country of Switzerland and UNESCO, ITU, the International Atomic Energy Agency, our think tank in the United States, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and all of the new startups. And it is very exciting to see all of the new technologies that are coming through, such as what was mentioned by the panel before, telemedicine, healthcare, a lot of solutions on farming to monitor the quality of the soil, the quality of the water, the depth and the availability of water, and so on and so forth. There's a bunch of new technology coming in to predict forest fires, to predict hurricane paths, and finally, education. So we're very, very proud, and these are good PPPs that are working extremely well. And they're working well because also they're driven by the United Nations, and it's something that is working extremely well. And then finally, this is the PPP that I think is a really good example for the future. And our think tank is working very hard on launching this. This is called the Cyber Eagle project. So currently, critical infrastructure is very much at risk across the world. Within the NATO countries, we're receiving a lot of cyber attacks in an incremental fashion from Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China. And it's getting to the point whereby people's safety, their human safety, is at risk. The safety of the families of the data center managers that are being hacked is put at risk, because we're talking about the ability now for cyber hackers using generative AI to be much more intrusive and to be able to control operational technology. So they can drive your car off the road. They can do some very, very nefarious things. So this initiative uses generative AI to pull all of critical infrastructure together. We have a partnership that we're developing right now with NATO, with the United States Department of Defense, with the SBA, and with NIST. The powerful idea here is that what we want to do is that we want to provide the money for leveling up the cybersecurity posture of companies in critical infrastructure through government funding, whilst at the same time using AI to show them where their vulnerabilities lie. These are the two really important things that are needed. And generative AI is a leveler, because when we talk about equitable access to technology, we're not only talking about providing equity for people that have disabilities. We're also talking about companies that are left behind. Companies are individuals, they're entities as well. And many companies, if you like, are being biased against or discriminated against because they're the forgotten ones. They're the medium-sized ethanol manufacturer that does their own little lab, and nobody knows about them, nobody's helping them, and they're vulnerable, and they're going to get ransomware. And so therefore, this program here is looking to revolutionize all of that, and it's going to happen next year. It's going to be an overnight phenomenon, and it's going to be a $26 billion marketplace. So we're very excited about that, really. And so here we are. In summary, private-public partnerships, really, they're hard to implement, but there's no other way to affect change at scale. This is the way to do it. You cannot do it without partnering. You have to involve multi-stakeholders. You have to involve government. You have to involve universities. You have to involve corporations. You have to involve the public, civil society and international organizations like the UN. You know, my feeling is our strength, you know, has always lied in working together. And now with technology's immense potential, we stand at a crossroads. Collaboration can usher in an era of new prosperity, or disunity could lead to our downfall. And the future really rests on our ability to choose collaboration. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you for listening.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for questions, but you can see this man, right? You can find him, ask him some questions, engage with him, and dialogue further, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate you.